This cause of the open enticers to idolatry was not brought to the judges as common idolaters, and such who were enticed to serve other gods and worship them were to be brought to the gates and to be stoned first by the hands of witnesses, and afterwards by all the people. Deuteronomy 17, verses 3, 5, and 7. But this is another law, of which the Jewish antiquaries, and particular Grotius, out of Philo, and the Rab, upon the place, saith, quote, whereas in other crimes the guilty used to be kept after the sentence a night and a day, that if he could say any more for himself he might, these were expected from this benefit. And not only so, but it was permitted to any to excuse judgment upon them, that is, enticers to idolatry, without waiting for a judge. The like was used against sacrilegious robbers of the temple and priests who sacrificed when they were polluted, and those who cursed God by the name of an idol, and those who lay with an idolatress, chiefly those who denied the divine authority of the law. And this behooved to be before the people at least 10, which in Hebrew they called cheda. Neither is this to be admitted in so grievous a crime, when even the manslayer, without the place of refuge, might have been killed by the kinsmen of the defunct. Unquote. And upon Numbers 15, verse 30, the punishment of presumptuous blasphemers, he says, quote, but here these are to be understood thus, that the guilty shall not be brought to the judges, but be killed by them that deprehended them in the crime, as Phinehas did to Zimri. Unquote. And proves it out of Maimonides' Poole synopsis critic on the place. And it must be so, for in this case no mention is made either of judges or witnesses, or further judgment about it, than that he that was tempted by the enticer should fall upon him, and let the people know it, that they might lay hands on him also. Otherwise evil men might pretend such a thing when it was not true. But in case of a city's apostasy and hearkening to enticers, the thing was only to be solicitously enquired into, and then, though it was chiefly incumbent upon the magistrate to punish it, yet it was not restricted to him, but that the people might do it without him. And upon this moral ground was Israel's war stated against Benjamin in Judges 20, verse 13, when there was no king nor judge, and also when there were kings that turned idolaters and tyrants, they served them so, as here is commanded. Witness Amaziah, as is showed above. Hence not only Moses, upon the people's defection into idolatry in the wilderness, commanded all on the Lord's side, every man to put his sword by his side, and to slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor, whereby 3,000 fell at that time by the sword of the Levites. Exodus 32, verses 27 and 28. But also Joash, Gideon's father, upon the same moral ground, though he was no magistrate, could say to the Abiezerites, will ye plead for Baal? He that will plead for him, let him be put to death while it is yet morning. Judges 6, verse 31. Moreover, as Mr. Mitchell adduces the example very pertinently, we see that the people of Israel destroyed idolatry not only in Judah, wherein the king concurred, but in Ephraim and in Manasseh, where the king himself was an idolater, and albeit they were but private persons, without public authority. For what all the people was bound to do by the law of God, everyone was bound to do it to the uttermost of his power and capacity. Mr. Mitchell offers this place to vindicate his fact of shooting at the prelate. Deuteronomy 13, verse 9, quote, wherein, says he, it is manifest that the idolater or enticer to worship a false god is to be put to death by the hand of those whom he seeks to turn away from the Lord, which precept I humbly take to be moral and not merely judicial, and that it is not at all ceremonial or Levitical. And as every moral precept is universal, as to the extent of place, so also as to the extent of time and persons. Unquote. The chief thing objected here is that this is a judicial precept peculiarly suited to the old dispensation, which to plead for as a ruler under the New Testament would favor of Jewish rigidity inconsistent with the gospel spirit. Answer. How Mr. Knox resells this and clears that the command here is given to all the people needs not be here repeated. But it were sufficient to read it in the foregoing representation, period 3, page 24, and, as it is also cited by Just Populi on page 212, etc. But these general truths may be added concerning the judicial laws. Number 1. None can say that none of the judicial laws concerning political constitutions is to be observed in the New Testament. For then many special rules of nature and necessary equity would be rejected, which are contained in the judicial laws of God. Yea, all the laws of equity in the world would be so cast. For none can be instanced which may not be reduced to some of the judicial laws. And if any of them are to be observed, certainly these penal statutes, so necessary for the preservation of policies, must be binding. Number 2. If we take not our measure from the judicial laws of God, we shall have no laws for punishment of any malefactors by death of divine right in the New Testament, and so all capital punishments must be only human constitutions, and consequently they must be all murderers, for to take away the life of man, except for such causes as the Lord of our life, to whose arbitrament is only subject, hath not approven, is murder, as Dr. Ames saith in De Homicidio Conscience, Lib 5, Cap 31, Question 2. For in the New Testament, though in the general, the power of punishing is given to the magistrate, yet it is nowhere determined, neither what nor how many crimes are to be punished. If therefore penal laws must be taken from the Old Testament, the subject of executing them, as well as the object, must be thence deduced. That is, what is there restricted to the magistrate must be so still, and what is permitted to the people must remain in the like manner their privilege, since it is certain the New Testament liberty is not more restricted as to penal laws than the Old. Number 3. Those judicial laws which had either somewhat typical or pedagogical or peculiar to the then judicial state are indeed not binding to us under that formality, though even these doctrinally are very useful, insofar as in their general nature, or equity of proportion, they exhibit to us some documents of duty. But those penal judgments which are in the matter of them are appended to the moral law, and are in effect but accurate determinations and accommodations of the law of nature, which may suit our circumstances as well as the Jews, do oblige us as well as them. And such are these penal statutes I adduce, for that blasphemy, murder, and idolatry are heinous crimes, and that they are to be punished, the law of nature dictates. And how and by whom in several cases they are to be punished, the law judicially determines. Concerning the moral equity, even of the strictest of them, Amasius de Conscience, Lib 5, Mosaical appendix of precepts, doth very learnedly assert their binding force. Number 4. Those judicial laws, which are but positive in their form, yet in their special, internal, and proper reason and ground, be moral, which pertains to all nations, which is necessary and useful to mankind, which is rooted in and may be fortified for human reason, and as to the substance of them approven by the more intelligent heathens, those are moral and oblige all Christians as well as Jews, and such are these laws of punishing idolaters, etc., founded upon moral grounds, pertaining to all nations, necessary and useful to mankind, rooted in and fortified by human reason, to wit, that the wrath of God may be averted, and that all may hear and fear, and do no more so wickedly, especially if this reason be superadded, when the case is such, that innocent and honest people cannot be preserved, if such wicked persons be not taken order with. Number 5. Those judicial laws, which being given by the Lord's immediate authority, though not so solemnly as the moral decalogue, are neither as to their end dead, nor as to their use deadly, nor as to their nature indifferent, nor in any peculiar respect restringible only to the Jews, but the transgressions whereof both by omission and commission are still sins, and were never abolished neither formally nor consequently in the New Testament, must be moral. But such as these penal laws I am speaking of, they cannot be reputed among the ceremonial laws, dead as to their end and deadly as to their use, or indifferent as to their nature. For sure, to punish the innocent upon the account of these crimes were still sin, now as well as under the Old Testament, and not punish the guilty were likewise sin now as well as then. If then the matter be moral and not abolished, the execution of it by private persons, in some cases when there is no access to public authority, must be lawful also. Or if it be indifferent, that which is in its own nature indifferent cannot be in a case of extreme necessity unlawful, when otherwise the destruction of ourselves and brethren is in all human consideration inevitable. That which God hath once commanded, and never expressly forbidden, cannot be unlawful in extraordinary cases. But such are these precepts we speak of, therefore they cannot be in every case unlawful. Concerning this case of the obligation of judicial laws, Ames, De Conscience, Lib 5, Cap 1, Question 9. Number 6. Those laws which are predicted to be observed and executed in the New Testament cannot be judicial or Judaical, restricted to the Old, but such is this. In the day that a fountain shall be opened for the house of David for sin and for uncleanness, which clearly points at gospel times, it is said, quote, The Lord will cause the prophets and the unclean spirits to pass out of the land, and it shall come to pass that when any shall yet prophesy, then his father and his mother that begat him shall say unto him, Thou shalt not live, and shall thrust him through when he prophesieth, unquote. Zechariah 13, verse 3, which cannot be meant of a spiritual penetration of the heart, for it is said, He shall not live, and the wounds of such as might escape by resistance or flight are visible in his hands, verse 6. It is therefore to be understood of corporal killing enticers to idolatry according to the law, Deuteronomy 12, verse 9, either by delivering them up to the judges, as Piscator on the place says, or as Grotius saith, They shall run through, as Phinehas did Zimri in Numbers 25. Understand this of a false prophet, desiring to entice the people to the worship of false gods, for the law empowered every Jew to proceed against such, which law expressly adds, that they should not spare their son, if guilty of such a crime. For all which I conclude, if people are to bring to condign punishment idolatrous apostates, seeking to entice them, then may oppressed people daily in hazard of the death of their souls by compliance, or of their bodies by their constancy and duty, put forth their hands to execute judgment, in case of necessity, upon idolatrous apostates and incendiaries, and the principal murdering emissaries of tyrants, that seek to destroy people, or enforce them to the same apostasy. But the former is true, therefore, etc. Number 4. The same may be inferred from that command of rescuing and delivering our brother when in hazard of his life, for omitting which duty no pretense, even of ignorance, will excuse us. Proverbs 24, verses 11 and 12. If thou forbear to deliver them that are drawn unto death, and those that are ready to be slain, if thou sayest, Behold, we knew it not, doth not he that pondereth the heart consider it? And he that keepeth thy soul, doth not he know it? And shall not he render to every man according to his works? That is, quote, rescue out of the hand of the invader, robber, unjust magistrate, etc. And that either by defending him with your own hand, or tongue, or any other lawful way, men use to make a great many excuses, either that they know not his danger nor his innocence, nor that they were possessed of so great authority that they might relieve him, that they have enough to do to mind their own affairs, and not concern themselves with others, etc. He proposes and redargues here, for example's sake, one excuse comprehending all the rest, unquote. As commentators say, Poole, Synopsis Critic, in Locum. This precept is indefinitely given to all, principially indeed, belonging to the righteous magistrates, but in case of their omission, and if, instead of defending them, they be the persons that draw or send out their destroying emissaries to draw them to death, then the precept is no more to be restricted to them than that verse 1, not to be envious against evil men, or verse 10, if thou faint in the day of adversity, thy strength is but small, can be said to be spoken only to magistrates. Hence, if it be a duty to rescue our brethren from any prevailing power that would take their lives unjustly, and no pretense even of ignorance will excuse the forbearance of it, then it must be lawful in some extraordinary cases to prevent the murdering violence of public incendiaries by killing them, rather than to suffer ourselves or our brethren to be killed when there is no other way, in probability, either of saving ourselves or rescuing them. But here the former is commanded as a duty, therefore the latter also must be justified when the duty cannot otherwise be discharged. Now, having thus at some length endeavored to discuss this some way odd and esteemed odious head, to which task I have been as unwillingly drawn as the actors here pleaded for were driven to the occasion thereof, whom only the necessity of danger did force to such achievements, to preserve their own brethren's lives in prosecuting the cause, and nothing but the necessity of duty did force me to this undertaking, to defend their name from reproach, and the cause from calumnies.